I suppose asking someone when they discovered they had a vocation, it's like asking them, when did you know you were in love? Some people seem to know at the first glance across a crowded room. For other people, it's a very gradual thing. And I suppose in my case, it was just a very gradual process. Growing up in a town in Northern Ireland in the 50s and in the 60s, steeped in a very reassuring, positive, supportive culture where school and parish and GAA club all overlapped. It meant that I grew up in an environment where I felt very hopeful about the future and a good sense of belonging. And then as well as that, being one of those teenagers of the 60s going to university in 1968, I suppose I grew up in a very optimistic period as well. And entering seminary was not a difficult decision to make on my part. One of the careers teachers in school asked me what I wanted to do. I said, I thought of teaching. He said, do you ever fancy being a priest? I said, yeah, sort of. He says, well, would you give it a try? And I said, yeah, okay. So it was one of those things that I just grew into, I suppose. And then I had 9 years in seminary, which gave me a great opportunity to decide whether this was for me or not. There were the ups and there was the downs. There was a year spent working in Germany. There were a number of years in the Irish College in Rome. So when I got to ordination at the age of 27, I had every chance behind me to say, is this what I feel I want to do? Is this what I believe God is calling me to be involved in? So I can look back on my ordination day and say, I was an adult who had ample opportunity to reflect on where I was and what was happening, and I made a very free choice on that day. And looking back on it, like so many people who spent many years together themselves, I can say, despite the ups and downs since then, I'm very, very happy that I made that decision in 1977. Because when you can look back and say, I made an adult decision, an adult commitment, and I'm trying to live out some sort of authenticity, some sort of integrity, some sort of coherence following on that decision. It gives you a great sense of being anchored in a place where you made a realistic human decision on the basis of who you were and what you felt called to be and to do. And for that reason, I'm happy with both the calling that I got then and the constantly repeated calling that you get, whether in marriage or in a job or in priesthood or religious life, to say, how do I want to continue to be faithful to the decision I made early on? But I feel it's been very deeply rooted in my personality. I feel I've been very blessed to have had so many opportunities to live out of that rich home background that I had. And it's given me great strength to face the challenges of the past 35 years. I know many people would say nowadays, why on earth would anyone think of committing themselves to priesthood or religious life? In fact, many ask the same question about marriage. Why on earth would anyone commit themselves at a certain age to spending the rest of their lives with another person? I suppose over my years in growing up and trying to mature a bit, a number of things have struck with me. And one of them particularly was that book by Viktor Frankl, on his experience of being a prisoner in a concentration camp in Austria during the war. And he's a lovely line which says, Western society gives people the means by which to live, but fails to give them a meaning for which to live. And I think much of the fragmentation that we experience in our society, much of that dystopia that we hear talked about, much of that fear of the future actually comes from the fact that we have given people lots of things to entertain them, but actually failed to supply a language, a narrative, a context within which people can say, not that my life has a certain value, but that my life is experienced by me as being precious, as being cherished, as being loved, as being something of eternal beauty and value. So in the context of that fragmentation of our society, the increase in mental illness, in self-harm and all those things, then Pope John Paul II in 2003 brought out a document on the church in Europe. And the key word in all of the chapters in that was hope. Europe actually is a continent without much sense of hope, much sense of direction. And in fact, what's happened since then in the financial and political sphere perhaps underlines that. So I would say there's a huge need for those who will proclaim a message of hope and a message of healing. Part of the disappointment with the church, I think, in our modern culture is not so much disappointment with faith or anger at faith. It actually is disappointment in a world that's lacking in hope, that the church in many places has failed to be the beacon of hope that it really could be, and that many people are crying out for it to be. I know from being at World Youth Day, from seeing the number of people who take on things like the Camino of Santiago, people who are genuinely looking to go into the depths of their lives and to feel nourished on that journey. I think our culture actually is recognising the need for spirituality, and it's precisely in that huge hunger for spirituality, for spiritual experience, that they need people who will say, I will dedicate my life not just to looking after a parish, not to doing a job in a parish, but to, in many ways, incarnating that search for the spiritual, that search for the transcendent, that commitment to build community in a lonely world. And I know from talking to the good number of young people in our own diocese who say, I would like to consider going into seminary, or the number who are in seminary, the word I get back from them is, we're not part of the problem. We want to be part of the solution. So I actually find young people, from my own experience, being remarkably idealistic and disappointed not by the questions that faith answers, but actually by the answers to those questions that many adults are giving to them. And I think what many young people are saying, be authentic, be honest, be genuine. Give us something that will nourish us for the long journey, because there's a real sense of hunger out there for beauty, for truth, for goodness. And I think what we have failed to do in many cases is actually to respond to those needs of young people. Those needs may be expressed in the sense of anger at church, but I think, as we found throughout the history of the church, whether with the apostles or the great medieval saints, male and female, those who can speak with authenticity, with humility, with love in their hearts, and with hope as well, those are the ones who will speak into the heart of our very fragmented culture. There's a huge need for those who will be personally, in their own lives, witnesses to a good news that our society so much hungers for. I'd love to see more people joining me on that journey.